3 sessions, we had an opportunity to interact with D&I leaders from different organizations, for example, from Sapient, ThoughtWorks, and KPMG. By the way, you should definitely check out Inclusify's YouTube channel because we have all these entire recordings live. Uh, Today is a very special session because we have a very special guest. We have Celia Sandhya Daniels with us. She's an Asian Indian non-ops trans woman of color. She's a woman of multiple talents and her intellect is beyond. So she's an entrepreneur, musician, photographer, storyteller, activist, and a filmmaker. In 2019, she won the Human Rights Campaign Equality Award for outstanding commitment and service to our community. She's currently the executive board for Trans Can Work and the VP of Stonewall Democrats of Ventura County, California. So without further ado, Celia, I would like to give you the stage.
Thank you so much, Regina. I appreciate that. So I appreciate this has been a journey for me where I want to always tell my story because stories matter. You know, it's important for us to tell our stories and then talk about how we can change the community, how we can change the society. So it's always been my dream, and it's been a little bit in the morning. I just had my coffee, and I'm happy to take this session forward. So if you have any questions, we're going to park these questions and you can ask those questions later. But I just want to tell you my story because you might be wondering, what is Celia doing in LA, and how is that going to be making sense for what we are doing today in India? So I was born in India. I was born in Chennai. And while I was 4 years old, my mom knew that I was a little different. I didn't have social media at the time, but all I could say was my mom was very keen about the way I was reacting. And I said, Mom, I want to be a girl. And my mom looked at the social constructs created by the colonial British government. And she knew that this is what they had at the time, you know, this binaries, it's male or female. And there was a boy who was interested in being a girl. And that was really weird for her. And she said, no, you're a boy, you're not a girl. You know, you just have to be who you are. And at the time, I didn't understand because I was 4 years old. I was running around in my cousin sister's skirts. And it was a fun time till I went to the 7th grade. When I went to my 7th grade, my mom, when I was 7 years old, my mom said again that, hey, you're a boy, you shouldn't be wearing a skirt. And it kind of hit me at that point where I was struggling with my gender. I knew that my anatomy was not doing justice to my gender. And I just learned to suppress my femininity and I wanted to survive. Because at that time I felt like I wanted to express my preferred gender, but my birth gender was a boy. And I was struggling in both my genders, and that's how my childhood started in India. So way back then, there was only the Hijra community, or the Arwanis, as they called them those days, and now they're called as Tirunangais and Tirunambis. But those days, it was a very different situation. People didn't know much about why a boy wants to be a girl or why a girl wants to be a boy. And that's how I grew up. In my 4th grade, I didn't expect this, but my uncle, he abused me. You know, he molested me and I didn't realize that something that could happen to me. I didn't expect, and I was blaming it on myself. And I said, maybe because I look very different, maybe because I look feminine that they're doing this to me. I remember just after 2 years, my cousin brother did the same thing. And I didn't know how to react to it. And I went into my own shell. I used to go to the beach and cry a lot because that was the only therapy. I was afraid of telling my mom about who I was. I wish I had come out and told my mom, I'm going through a lot, but the shame was so huge. The shame that I was going through at that time seemed so significant in my life that it was just consuming me. It just took away the joy. It took away a lot of things. Every morning I used to wake up thinking, what do I need to do today so that people won't misunderstand me as a sissy boy? That was the way I used to start my days. When I saw girls, I was attracted to them, and I was also wanting to be one of them. So this is how my life started. And I remember a time in my ninth grade, I really wanted to go out. So I wore a long skirt, a top, and I put a scarf around my head, and I walked outside. To my surprise, I was caught by the security at near a construction site, and they were humiliating me. And I didn't realize why they were so angry, because they were using a lot of derogatory words and it was highly discriminating for me, and I didn't realize why they did that to me. And I stood there around 10 alcohol-breathing men just surrounding me and just yelling at me, pointing fingers at me. And I was thinking to myself, why are people so angry at someone like me? I didn't steal, I didn't do anything wrong. And I was scared that day because I was publicly humiliated by, and then there were a lot of crowd of people that started coming, and they were just standing there and they were just watching the fun. And I was so scared that day, I thought something might happen. They were asking my home address, they were asking where I lived, who is my dad. And I thought to myself, you can do anything you want to me right now, but I don't want this shame to go to my family, because that's something that I cannot take it. And that's how my ninth grade was. And I went back home and I started crying, and I was afraid to live at the time. And I wanted to kill myself. And I tried committing self-harm, and I tried committing suicide also. I did a lot of damage to my own self, and I didn't realize that it was actually something that was an inner trauma. Only now I realize it's an inner trauma that I was going through, which I couldn't express, but at the time it wasn't that way. And I realized that this is how I am, and I'm just going to live in denial. So my dream became a doubting stage, and then I went into a point where I was in denial. And there was a time when I was almost 28 years old, my parents were looking for a girl, and they said, hey, you need to get married. I had a great job. I was working in Indian Institute of Science. I was working on the Human Genome Project, which was very fascinating at the time. And these are times when Silicon Graphics, Terminator 2 movies, where Terminator 1 had come, Jurassic Park had come, and I was actually working on those workstations. And I was developing codes and X Windows, and I was very good in what I was doing. But deep inside, I was always struggling. I met this beautiful girl that my parents introduced me. I was attracted to her, and I thought, if I marry a woman, maybe my femininity would go away. And so I truly believed in it, and I got into our relationship. We got married. And soon after I got married, I was asked to manage some clients in JP Morgan Chase at New York. So I came here through my company, and I was also managing some other clients at the time. But when I came here, I was going through a lot of gender dysphoria, which I didn't know at the time. That was when I'm in my male gender, I have a dysphoria that kind of creates a gap between my preferred gender. I'm going to talk a little bit about all this during my sessions today. But this is how trans people go through. It's called gender dysphoria, and it's highly damaging. It causes a lot of internal stress and trauma to people. So while I was struggling with a lot of things that was going on in my life, we had a child. And this was a time when I was living in Florida. I was doing very well business-wise. I was a client partner for a multinational company. I was managing businesses, millions of dollars. I was flying back and forth from India to US, and sometimes to some other parts of the country. My life was so good professionally. Personally, I was struggling. I used to go to the hotel rooms during those business trips, and I used to wear a skirt or a maxi dress, or that's the way I was expressing my femininity. I was afraid to go outside because I was an executive, and I was wondering, what would people think? what if my teammates or what if the people who are reporting to me see me? It's going to be a shame. That's the way I was living my life. I wanted to come out to my wife in 2004. I was going through a lot of stress, and I told my wife that, sweetheart, I'm going to tell you something. And I started in a very wrong way. I didn't know how to tell her what I was going through. I told her that I sometimes dress in women's clothes. That didn't go very well because she said, if you're dressing in women's clothes, then don't dress in women's clothes. And I was trying to tell her that, no, actually, I'm going through something inside which I'm not able to express. And she said, you need to see a therapist. I didn't sign up for this. We have a child now and you need to focus on your work. You're doing very well business-wise. Why are you suddenly bringing up all these? It's going to be really hard for us to run a family this way. It was just 4 years into our marriage. And I was so scared because I love my wife dearly. I love my daughter dearly. And I didn't want anything to happen to them. And I said, okay, no matter what happens, I'm just going to suck it up. I'm just going to start living my life. And I'm not going to tell them what I'm doing, but I'm just going to go ahead. And I told her, sweetheart, I will talk to some therapist. I spoke to a therapist on the phone. And since I was brought up in a Christian environment back in India, I called a Christian counselor in Florida, and I spoke to him and I asked him, I told him my entire story and I asked him, what do I do? Why am I different? And he said, you're gay. I was thinking to myself that I am really not gay because I am not attracted to men. I'm attracted to women in spite of who I am. But why is this happening to me? And he said, no, I know people like you, you are gay. And at the time, I wasn't sure of what he meant by categorizing me as gay. And I spoke to another counselor after a few years, and she was a trans therapist and a surgeon. She looked at me and said, Celia, are you happy? I told her, yeah, I am happy. But if you change your gender, if you change they used to call it as SRS those days. It was, now they call it GRS, which is gender reassignment surgery. You'll be happy. And I thought to myself, I'm a well-educated person, and why am I listening to them? So I just went to the stage where I thought, I'm not going to live in denial. If I was born this way, and if I'm a biologist and I know a lot about chromosomes and hormones, if I don't understand, people won't be able to understand me. So I need to educate myself as to why a person like me or why trans people are different. So I started doing the discovery. I went to a phase where I started studying about people like me. What does the research say? To my surprise, I found a lot of people in different cultures, Filipino, African American, Latinos, Asians, Japanese folks, people from Middle East, Spanish speaking folks. They were in every culture you had trans community. There were always people with a third gender. In Native American culture, there are 5 genders. It's so interesting and it's fascinating to know. There's so many identities and different genders in other cultures. And I thought to myself, why are people in India so oppressed about the trans community? They treat us like they either keep us elevated in a temple, they give us so much of importance and prominence when it comes to certain performances. That's how they are religiously treated well. But when it comes to the normal day-to-day living, they're still struggling. I thought to myself, there are a lot of people like me who don't want to come or identify with the traditional Hijra community, but there are people who are non-traditional. And how do we struggle? What do we do? How do we change it? So I started working with my friend in India at the time I met her. Her name is Kalki Subramanian. I was working with Kalki and we started doing understanding more, and I was more fascinated by what was going on in India. How can we change things in India? How can we empower people in India? So I learned a lot of things from her, and I also took the art from India and brought it here, where we did a lot more collaboration work, where I was empowering the trans people when their art that they drew on the street was being distributed or being shown to the community over here. It was fascinating for them. They were so encouraged. And my life was also getting a little bit different. I didn't want to tell my wife about it. And one day, my daughter, when she was 15 years old, she found out that her dad was different. And I explained to her that, sweetheart, this is my life, and this is exactly how dad is going through. There are a lot of people like your dad who's going through these issues, and I want you to know. And she said, Dad, I'm cool with it. She gave a thumbs up and she said, Dad, I'm fine with it. And she moved on. And it was just 25 minutes, she accepted me. My wife, after 17 years, and we've been married for 23 years, and we are still married. I'm so blessed to have her. She still had a lot of trouble accepting her husband as a trans person. And though I'm a non-op trans, I'm going to explain a little bit more in detail about it. I just wanted to tell this story because it's so important for the Indian community to understand that transgender folks are not just in the streets or not just in the temple, not just in the media, but they are in your office today. They are with you today and they are not able to come out. It's because your office environment is not very encouraging, not very open. Even though you have policies that are there, it was hard for me to come out. I've been working for 20 years in a multinational company and I didn't want to come out. And then I moved to another company, I didn't want to come out. And finally, when I joined Capgemini, I came out. I was one of the top executives and I was so ashamed to come out. I was so scared, because it was the way the structures, the power structures are organized in these companies that we sometimes don't know where it's going to lead us to. Will I have my job? Will I get fired? I'm in the executive board in this country, and is it going to affect my career? So there were a lot of questions. Now I have started my own company and I'm doing consulting in biopharmaceutical and healthcare. I still do consult and I have clients who are actually accepting. I have given panel discussions for biotechnology companies and a lot of other companies. I've been openly talking about my transition. I've been openly talking about my social life, and I've always told them that it is possible. Your productivity of your company is not going to go down just because you're hiring trans or you're coming out as trans in your company. With that, I just want to pause and then move on to the next phase of my discussion. I just wanted to just pause and see if you have any questions so far before I move on to the next section.
We do have a couple of questions. Would you like to take them right now, or should we wait till the end of the session to address them?
I'll take probably 2 questions and then I'll, if the answer is in the forthcoming sessions, then I'm going to move on to the next one. But if you can, anything that
Sure. So the first question is, as a family or a friend, how can we be more understanding and supportive towards the trans people?
I have this covered in my coming slides. So I would pause and take this question there. And I have explained in detail how to help your friend or child when they come out. So I have some slides on that.
All right.
The next question.
What are the best sources to educate ourselves about literature related to LGBTQ plus community?
Absolutely. I have some articles that I'll be passing on through Regina, and you can take those articles and read them. These are PDFs that are openly available, and these are resources that I use for parents here. I have a support group for trans community where this is with the white community predominantly in LA, and I also have folks for Latinos or the African American community. They all come there, but the issues are just the same. Though we have intersectional identities, our issues are still the same. And I have discussed that in my slides that are coming. So I would definitely talk about it. It's called allyship and how can you be an ally. I've talked in detail about it. Any other questions?
2 so far. I think people are gonna pour in more questions as we move
forward. No problem. Absolutely. Yeah. So please feel free to ask any question because I want you to be open, and you can ask me any question. I'm not going to be offended because if you have never asked a question to a transgender person, this is the time for you to ask those questions. And I'm going to go really in detail because a lot of these taboos, we need to take them off the table. Because once we remove these taboos in your company, it's going to really help you to understand the trans community more. And that's exactly what I want to do. I talk publicly about my family, my daughter, and I go home and tell my wife, I was talking about you today. She'll always laugh. So what did you tell them about me? I said, no, it's all good things. Because I'm blessed to have a family like that, where I can actually talk to them, still be a professional, and still do what I can, and to help the community back in India and also in US. So I'm going to ask you one question today. When is the first time you realized your gender? I just want to know from you. I mean, it could be just two of you or anyone. It's a very thought-provoking question, right? When is the first time you actually realized your gender?
So if
You can give
everybody
your
can just type in the chat section, and we can read out a couple of replies then.
like I was just to give you some, the pre-note on that. I realized my gender when I was probably, when my mom told me, I think it's around 5 or 6 years old. I realized that I was in both genders, that I had, that I'm a boy and I wanted to be a girl. It was very, very weird at the time. So yeah, that was the time for me. It kind of came up.
You have asked a very difficult question, because if I think about it myself, I don't have the answer. I remember my parents telling me that I'm a girl, but what does being a girl really mean? I don't remember when I understood really. But we have a couple of people saying that when they were 2 years old, 3 years old, if you have to take an average, it's from 3 to 4 years. That's what they're citing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very interesting thing, right? Because some of them don't even know that they're going through a gender issue. So I'm just going to move on to the next part of my discussion. There's something on my screen. I just want to make sure that I'm not closing my session, but okay, good. Okay. So if you have any questions, please feel free to mark them down and ask any questions. This is an open forum. And again, I want to reiterate that, please go ahead, ask me any questions that you have never, ever asked a trans person. And I want to be absolutely transparent in terms of my answer. If I don't know the answer, I'm just going to guide you to the answer where it's available. So one of the important things that we look at is there are countries, if you look at the D&I spectrum. Now let's go to the meat of the stuff, right? If you look at the D&I spectrum across the world, countries like India, which is 78%, has said that D&I is really important. This is important for us. Companies like Japan have said D&I is really important. That's why they are marked at 86%. Countries like Belgium, they don't see so much of importance of diversity and inclusion, maybe because they don't have too many diversity, or maybe they have diversity in their organizations or within the country. This is just looking at it from a world point of view. Now, the diversity considerations in US is different from the diversity considerations in India. When we talk about D&I, and the diversity considerations in Middle East would be different. The diversity considerations in Europe is going to be different. In Australia, New Zealand, everywhere, it's a little bit different. In India, it's very unique because we are dealing with something called caste, a caste system. We deal with class system, which I would call it in the US context, it could be more a socio-economical, would be the class system. Then we deal with gender, race, religion. Religion is a very important thing for US now, and especially there are some discrimination within the workplace based on religion also. So I just wanted to emphasize that. But in India, these are generally the typical issues that we go through. Now, when you look at the diversity distribution in India, it starts from women empowerment, right? That's the first way where it was more of focusing on women, helping them to get into workplace and providing all the benefits so the women can start working. The percentage has gone really high. I don't know the current percentage, but definitely more than 50% of the women are employed. they are having benefits within the workplace, and they are treated equally. Still, there's some work to do. But then you look at the socioeconomical people with socioeconomical status are still not there yet. Veterans, sometimes they have challenges as well. Differently enabled people still have challenges in India. And then there are other religious, cultural elements to it. People who have turbans in India, or if you see someone who is coming with with a namam and different caste and culture and religion, we exhibit at our workplace also. Right, and then the transgender folks are probably in the bottom of the food chain, right? They're way down there. And so we're going to be talking about that group that is way down there. And I want to tell you a story before I move on to my actual, the part of the presentation where I'm going to talk about policies. Now, the important thing is, I was, during one of my business trips, I was at MGM Grand in India, in Chennai. I was sitting there and having coffee, and it was a family place, and I was quietly, this is the dress that I was wearing, and I was very decently dressed, and there were families, there were children playing in the patio. This was near the beach, and a waiter came to me and said, "Ma'am, can I say something to you?" The first thing that hit me was, oh my God, they're going to ask me to move from here because this is a family place and they're seeing a trans person sitting there. And I was a little nervous and scared. And I said, yeah, what is it? And he said, ma'am, aap to kuch different lag raha hai. I was like, I'm sorry, what do you mean? I spoke in Hindi at the time. I'm not able to get my Hindi now. But I said, aisa kya pooch rahe hain? Why are you asking me like that? Then he said, I've been watching you, ma'am. I know you look different. Then I said, yeah, I'm a hijra. And then he went back and said, ma'am, don't say you're a hijra. You're not a hijra. Because you're educated. You're from US. And he knew that I was from US because of my transaction, my credit card that I was using. And he started talking to me like, he was respecting me so much. And I said, I am a hijra. It's just that I didn't come out, but people in India, they have actually come out and they're thrown the streets. Families have not accepted them. If I had come out, I don't know what my parents would have done. I don't know, but I was scared to come out. But now I'm out and I want to do something in India. And I asked him one question, are you nice to the hijra community in Uttar Pradesh? And he said, sorry, he was in Orissa. Orissa. He said, no, ma'am, I'm not nice to them. I don't like them because they are not good people. And he meant that in Hindi, and I was so upset. And I said, I'm exactly like that. If you can respect me, please respect them. Just because they don't have education, just because they're performing in the streets, please don't misunderstand them. And I knew at the time that sometimes, even within a community, even if you're transgender, people think of you when they look at you from a socioeconomical standpoint, they can elevate you on a different level. And I thought if our transgender community in India are all educated, the families are accepting, how easy it would be for you and me in the D&I spectrum, sitting in our companies and putting policies. It's going to be much easier because that is the story that we want to tell our people, that we are accepting, we're open. Now, I will pause this question and I'll go to the later part of this, but Regina, please remind me of this question because I want everyone to answer this question because this is something that everyone knows. And I just want to move on to the part where I'm going to talk a little bit about early education. I know there were two questions that came earlier during the conversation about how do we help families? As a family person, how do we help? So when I first came out and I told my mom I want to be a girl, the immediate answer was, no, you're not a girl, you're a boy, just move on with it. The problem that I see in families today is because when you see early signs and when kids talk about things like that, as early as 4 years old, kids can be coming out. And I've seen a pattern of kids even in US, in India as well. I will talk a little bit about why and how that can be helped. But one thing was when the kids say, and the children say, Mom, I want to be a boy. You shouldn't think that they're immediately tomboys. You know, they say, hey, I'm a tomboy, I'm a girly girl. These are just terminologies that we use, and we undermine some of their expressions that they are trying to bring up. And we have to listen to them and ask them why. Why do you want to be a girl? How often do you want to be a girl? Why do you say you want to be a girl? Sometimes they'll be just compassionate. But most of the times when a boy says, I want to be a girl, you need to really see the early signs and ask those questions. You need to seek help and find out why the child wants to be in a different gender. I'm talking about both trans men and also trans women. In this entire session, I want to bring up both cases. Sometimes if you don't allow them, don't ask them these questions, they're holding an inner trauma that they're going through. Just like I had. You know, I had suicidal tendencies. I tried committing suicide twice in my life. It was very hard for me because I couldn't talk to my parents. I couldn't talk to my brother. And recently when I came out to him, he apologized and said, I wish I was there for you when you're going through all this. And I'm so happy and I'm blessed to have a nice brother like that today. But that's what people don't understand. And sometimes counseling, mental health really helps. So when you're a parent, ask your child as to why they are different and how you can help them. This is something that I want to say is gender identity and realization comes at a early age in everyone's lives. But if acting upon it takes ages. I knew that in 4 years old, I was different. The actual time that I've taken over the years to come out, it was almost 47 years. So when I was 47, no, it was, yeah, when I was almost in my mid 40s, I actually came out in my community. It was so hard because that's the way it works. Some of them even come out in 60s. I have a friend of mine, she came out when she was 62 years old. And now she's living as, her true self. Sometimes what happens is when you're looking at the spectrum, some of them, when they are trans, they never come out. They only come out to their close friends. They don't even come out to their own family. And that's so hard, right? Because it's important for them to come out to their families. They don't come out to their families because they feel that the families will reject them. And they have seen the pattern in the Hijra community in India. And sometimes they feel like if I come out, maybe I'll be thrown in the streets, and I don't want to come out. They probably disclose to their really close friends. And this is how it comes. The entire pattern is distributed when you're coming out. So they don't come out at all. 12% of people don't come out at all because they don't know what to tell. And even if they tell someone that I am trans, or I want to be a girl, or I want to be a boy, people don't understand. Sometimes in the religious side, we look at the Bible and say that what you're doing is wrong. Sometimes in the temple, or sometimes even if you're a Muslim or a Sikh community, based on the religious faith and understanding, sometimes you say that, oh, no, this is wrong. What you're doing is wrong. You're not supposed to do it. Patriarchy plays a major role. If you're a man who wants to be a woman, that is so degrading for the manhood. That's how they look at it. And it's so sad, right? And that's how it was for me, because I was enjoying my male privilege and I did not like it while I was a boy, but that's the way a society is today. I'm going to give you 9 practical tips. These are 9 practical tips about how you can change your company and what you can do. The first thing is education and training is so important. I just put a picture of here, me teaching to students in Santa Barbara, UC Santa Barbara. And I love talking about my story. I love educating children because I have a daughter and I keep educating her even today. Now she's 20 years old. And she is one of my biggest ally, including my wife. So education and training has to be done in your company at both from the lower level, the middle level, and also at the senior level. Because it's important, not just the CEO and the CFO of your company, no, the C-levels people need to understand that, but it's also important for your managers to know who you are, what you're going through. And also your colleagues and the peers that you're working with, they need to know what you're going through. So incorporate them in your training manuals and have one training for trans sessions so that it really helps. Don't just have it for HR. HR folks are probably the front facing of the company. They're very compassionate, but don't think that just because the HR is open, your company is absolutely open to trans people. They may not be. You'll be surprised. So you have a lot of work to do there. Corporate programs are important, where you have corporate sessions, you have training sessions, panels, discussions, they're all important. And so also sensitivity trainings are really important. When you talk about sensitivity, you're talking about, what kind of acronyms do we use? How do we treat a trans person? And just like you treat another human being, how do you be sensitive to them? And there are a few things maybe you have to learn, but those are really important. And then have the trans employees come and talk about how they feel and what they would like to see in an environment like this. How would they work in an environment that's more open and honest? Now, I wanted to also lay out some fundamental ground rules before we go deeper into a session. I want you to know that sex and gender are two different things. I'm going to give you a colloquial way of remembering this so that, it kind of sticks in your mind. Sex is between your thighs and gender is in your head. And that's what people say. Sex is whom you go to bed with, and gender is how you go to bed as. That's gender. Now, I'll explain a little bit more about my sexual orientation and my gender identity. But people in the LG and B community are dealing with sexual orientation issues. So they're heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, pansexual, asexual, and intersexual. So I can go in detail about all the sexualities. And so, bisexual are folks who are interested in men and women. Pansexual are folks who are interested in men, women, and trans women also, trans women or trans men also. Asexual folks are who are more into themselves. They are not interested in having sex beyond themselves. Intersex are more folks who are, they're born in a different way. Sometimes they have two organs also. They have male and female organs. When they're born, the doctor calls the parents and they make a decision as to, hey, is this, your child is having ovaries, and also, it looks like they have testes. Now, what do we do? The child is going to have both the organs here, and we need to make a decision. And sometimes they decide to remove one of them. But later, I have stories in National Geography, an interview with Katie Couric, where she has interviewed a lot of intersex folks in US, and they have documented all this because there are close to 1.7 million intersex community in US alone. Just like a girl with a red hair, it's as equivalent as that, but they don't come out. The one person who actually came out was Jamie Lee Curtis. So Jamie Lee Curtis was an androgynous person who had both the organs, and when they made a decision that she will be a woman, and that's how she is, and she's very open about it because they want to educate the community. Transgender and gender non-binary folks are usually dealing with different, mostly gender identity, or I would say more in the head. So when I talk about gender non-binary, that means the trans people are mostly male to female or female to male. They're called trans men or trans women. Now, gender non-binary folks are the ones who choose between, they don't want to be a man or a woman, they just want to be themselves. And that is why they call themselves as gender non-binary. They're gender neutral mostly. So gender fluid is me. I am a person who's gender fluid, and I have a part of me that I don't hate. So I don't hate my male identity, and I have decided not to transition. So I fall somewhere as a gender fluid person. I have part of my life that I live as Daniels, and there is predominantly almost 90% of my life I live as Celia, and I'm out in the society, and my driver's license, everything, it is, I'm a gender non-binary, and that's how I express myself. Queer community are actually the most interesting community because they are the ones who really define the whole LGBTQ. And that's why Q is so important, because queer can be both in a sexual spectrum and also in a gender spectrum. Now, this is really, really important. Transgender and cisgender are really important. You may know this terminologies, but this is what predominantly we use in the medical community if you want to communicate what you're going through. A cisgender person is a person who is born and identifies in that same gender. If a person is born male, they identify as male. Transgender are a person who is born male but doesn't completely identify in that gender as a male. They're called transgender. And this is very simple. We don't have to confuse with the hijras or hijras and transgender. It's not that way. A person who doesn't identify in the gender they are born are called transgender. And that's the medical terminology. And that's how it is known across the world. So that's why I sometimes re-educate the Indian community to not use those words like transsexual, then hijra community, and then transgender. They are all the same. They're all under the transgender umbrella. I will talk a little bit about it, which is very important. And this is something that is so important because I work with a lot of psychiatrists in US. And when I work with them, this is how they identify a trans person. So I'm a transgender because I was born as a male and I don't identify completely in my male gender. I identify mostly in my feminine gender. And that's why I am called a transgender. Now, going a little bit deeper into this, there are non-op trans, there are pre-op trans, and post-op transgender. Post-op transgender are folks who have transitioned both hormones. They've taken hormones, they've taken medicines, and they have taken all the necessary precautions to make sure that they're transitioning as in the gender that they prefer. It could be male to female or female to male. I was surprised that in LA, while I was interacting with a lot of Indian community, I saw a lot of female to male transgender than male to female. So it's surprising that people, I'm in a big demand in LA. I mean, I say this as a fun because they have not seen too many male to female transgender who are Indians in Southern California, and they have not come out they have not come out. But if they have been born, they've been having hormones since they are kids, and those are the ones who are born in this country. And there are a few that I know of, but hardly, it's very, very few. The numbers are very few. It's because they don't want to come out. It's so much the society and the stigma we have. So post-op transgender are people who have had surgery, and both top surgery and bottom surgery. Now going to the pre-op transgender, these are folks who are probably taking hormones and getting ready for surgery. No, non-op transgender are folks, sometimes they take hormones, but they don't want to completely transition. Sometimes they don't even take any hormones. I've not taken any hormones. I've never done any hormones in my life. I'm planning not to because of various reasons, medical reasons. It could be social reasons, family reasons, religious reasons, whatever it is. So, and I want you, sometimes it's nice to go into the science of why people are different, right? When you look at it, the transgender woman's MRI is almost so close to a cisgender woman's MRI. If you see that in the bottom, it talks about a transgender woman's MRI is closer to the cisgender woman's. Because people will say if the person is transgender, they should be close to a cisgender man's MRI, but actually it is not. And they've done a research in Johns Hopkins. They've done some research in other countries, and they found that this is the kind of way in which why people are different, because they are born differently. Now, I also want to explain about trans men. Sometimes what happens is if you look in the left-hand side, it talks about normal feminization. In a normal feminization, what happens is there are some signals that are produced, and the estrogens are really important for the women to be a baby to be a woman, a fully grown woman. And sometimes what happens is if there is insufficient estrogens, and it's not, if there is an insufficient estrogen and it will not be received correctly, it could result in a transgender male. Or sometimes they have enough estrogen, but the signals and the receptions is not very good. It's like a cell phone reception when in your phone. Though you may have signals, sometimes if your phone is bad, you may not have reception. And that's the way this works. And so this is the reason why you have transgender male or transgender female, because they're born that way. Now, having said that, when you talk about gender identity, first thing that hits you is a woman, beautiful dress, she expresses very femininely, sexual orientation, they're usually straight, they like men. And men, exactly, this is how you always think about men and women. But I just wanted to give myself as an example. Now, I was born as a man, so I'm moving into the first column. It's man, it's male. And my gender identity, which is a third one, is more, I would say, more on the women's side than in the man's side. So though I am a gender fluid spectrum, I move more in the women's side. I am more comfortable as a woman. and I am more happier, and I am more different as a woman, more expressive as a woman. And that's why my gender expression is also more in the feminine side. And my sexual orientation is I'm straight. So people always think that trans women are always attracted to men, cisgender men, but it is not. So there are trans women who are still attracted to women. So for me, I'm attracted to, and that's one of the reasons why I'm attracted to my wife. And this is me. And there are a lot of trans women who are attracted to men. There are trans women who are attracted to trans men, trans women who are attracted to trans women. There are trans women who are attracted to trans men. Cisgender women, like me and my wife. My wife is a cisgender woman, and my daughter is a cisgender woman, and I'm more attracted to my wife because I am always attracted to women, and that's why I fall in the heterosexual scale. Observe the toxic signs and behaviors in your workplace. Making fun of women and being very discriminative is not really helping. So we need to be very careful about finding, is there any unconscious bias? I have had people come to me and say, oh, you look so pretty as a man. That is not a compliment, right? I mean, that's not the way you tell. You can say, you look great today. And that's how you pass a compliment. When you say you look so beautiful as a man, or for a man, you carry really well. Those are not compliments. Those are unconscious biases that you have. So it's so important even in a workplace, when you see a trans person walking into your meeting room, you don't want to be looking at how she looks, what she's dressed up. And those are the way you want to be, you don't want to encourage such thoughts in your workplace because they're very toxic. And when they're alone, sometimes what can happen is, there could be sexual harassments and lots of other things that can go. So have really, really strict sexual harassment policies. And also make sure that the trans person working in your office, he or she, the way they're using the pronouns, are feeling comfortable in the office place. Now, one of the things that I want to, and this is something, research that was done by one of the organizations. It's a pretty old research, but I didn't find the latest one. They say that in India, they know that there is another trans person. I know a trans person, but I don't know anyone personally. So after this seminar, you can say that I know Celia, right? I'm really sharing everything about my family to you. So you can say that I really know some person. And this is how the percentage is very high. I know somebody, but I don't know them personally. And that is how they are. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. You can see my posts because I'm very open about what I do. And I want people to know about, how the life of a trans person is. So I'm connected on LinkedIn. You can always follow me on LinkedIn or, send me a request. We can stay in touch. The third point I want to make is don't include, but integrate. I'll give you a simple example. Inclusion is more like companies talk about diversity and inclusion, and it's always D&I and sometimes equity. But the important thing is when you call someone, hey, I'm going for coffee. Do you want to join me? Yeah, sure. And then the next day, whenever they go for coffee, they call it, hey, do you want to join us? Yeah, sure. I'll come with you. That is called inclusion. That is not integration. What is integration is telling your friend or trans friend that, hey, at 10:30, we normally meet downstairs in coffee day. Would you like to come? That is putting a policy, a process in place. It's a simple example, but it's an important example to keep in mind because you want to integrate. It's not diversity and inclusion, but diversity and integration is so important. And inclusion is more reactive, integration is proactive. And that's what you want to be focusing on in a company. The framework of your HR, legal and finance has to be redefined. Security has to be redefined. Suppose you have a person like me. I'm a gender fluid person, and I have my office badge that says Daniels in it. So when I went as Celia to the office, I told them that, hey, I'm going to come to the office as Celia today. My badge says it's Daniels. Is it okay? So they said, oh, you are both, Celia and Daniel, you're the same person, so you're okay. But if you're not comfortable, we can give you another badge. So they gave me a temporary badge for the day. So I was able to go and sit in my office and work as Celia. I didn't have any problem at all. I was comfortably working, and then I went back home. So sometimes it's so easy to incorporate these ideas, even in the security side of your company. These policies can be changed. So talk to them clearly about the benefits that covers what facial feminization surgery, covers the gender reassignment surgery, hormone treatment, and all those benefits you have to let them know when they join the company. Don't be wishy-washy about it. Don't encourage them to join the company and then say, I'm so sorry, we actually don't have an insurance that covers this one. But be upfront about it, be clear about your policies and procedures. It's so important. Social and legal transition and medical transition. I'm not going to go detail in this, but it just talks about social and legal transition is what I have done. So transition can be different ways, because what I am doing inside my body, what I am doing inside my bedroom is none of your business, right? None of anyone's business. That is our own thing. So we don't have to go around and say that, oh, I have medically transitioned, so I'm a transgender. I'm a transgender all over. When I came out, people were asking me, are you going to medically transition? That was my top question everywhere. And I said, no. And they were like, oh, okay, I don't know how that's going to work, but it's been 10 years now, so I'm still there. So this is what I wanted to. I'm not going to go detail into these terminologies. I can leave some of this with Regina, but it's good to know what these terminologies mean from a gender side. And also, this is one thing that I want to talk about very clearly. Don't use the word transgendered or transgenders. Those are wrong terminologies. Transgender is singular. So if you want to say a group of transgender folks, you want to say transgender individuals. There's nothing like transgenders. Those are wrong terminologies. When I was doing a session in Coimbatore, the Times of India was taking my story, and they wrote in the bottom that Daniels is a transsexual who has come out as Celia. And I was looking at it and I was thinking, oh my God, I am literally not a transsexual. I've not changed my sex, and nobody uses the word transsexual anymore. These are wrong terminologies. We have to sensitize our media. So if in your company, if you're putting a note out saying that we hire transgenders, I have seen that itself says that your company is not a D&I. Okay, so you need to be really careful on how you word being more open to transgender community. So it's always like transgender community, transgender individuals. That's how you call transgender folks. And so that's something that I wanted to lay it out there. I talked about this a little bit, right? Traditional and non-traditional. Traditional transgender folks are the Hijra community, the ones who are more religious, to perform, because it's a 4,000-year-old culture in India, right? It's very old, and people are still fascinated about it. I give a lot of talks on gender fluidity also. And I'm having a talk coming up in the next 1 month or so about how the Hindu mythology, and then look at the gender fluidity that existed in India versus what we're going to do with that fluidity and take it forward and move it into the different parts of the world. Saying that gender fluidity is very open. So non-traditional are people like me, because when you talk about male to female and female to male trans, female to male trans don't come under traditional, right? They are not usually, that's not very accepted in the Hijra community. So non-traditional are people who are gender queer, gender fluid, people like me, and mostly they are all the ones who have come out in the organizations. They're educated well. That's how it is. And the traditional folks are basically, they don't have too much of healthcare. Their unemployment rate is very, very high, 90 to 95%. But the non-traditional side, since they're coming out late in their lives, the unemployment rate is very low there. Okay, this is funny, right? Because when you always think about India is so much into transgender, they believe that trans people are so special, right? They're so special, but actually they're so special because they want to keep them somewhere. They don't want to integrate them into the community, integrate them into the house. And when someone comes out and says, Mom, I'm trans, they're like, oh my God, you're a Hijra. Oh, all the drama that happens there. So that's how people are. They react so vehemently when they know that you're trans, because they always think trans people are supposed to be dasis in the temples, and that's what they did. Even in New Delhi, even in India, North India, they have a lot of trans folks who are performers. So the other important thing, which is so important for us to know, is always get your community involved with, get your company involved with the community. It's so important to have that touch point. And when you do that, there are close to 85% of the trans who need blue collar jobs. They can be receptionists, they can be in the hotels, not just doing a lot of blue collar jobs, but also white collar jobs. The lot of people like me who want to be an executive and still continue as a trans person, the companies are still not open to that here also in US too. So I'm trying to change that. So respect their education, respect their experience that they bring to your company. So it's important for you to know that you need to treat them in such a way that you know what is going on in the community, because you can't do an activity which is so much pink washing, right? When June Pride Month comes, everyone is all about pink washing. It's good to do that, but don't brand trans people, because they take trans people and they start branding them nicely. And once they start hiring trans folks during June, and the attrition rate is really high in the forthcoming months. So this is not how you do it. You want to have a Pride 365. 365 days in a year, you want to be doing Pride. And also look at your recruiting data, because you want to know if you're hiring trans people or LGBTQ spectrum, you want to make sure that the numbers don't lie. You want to make sure they're continuing in their work and they're not leaving, and why they're leaving. Have an exit interview and understand that they're leaving because of career aspirations. They're not leaving because of conducive environment. You want to be absolutely clear about it, because that is very vital in your company. Restroom and lockers are so important, because in US, this has become a mandate. In California, it's a mandate that you need to have a gender neutral bathroom. And so I'm very comfortable using the women's restroom in US, because they know I'm trans, and sometimes it's fine. I have used the women's restroom in Express Mall when I was in Chennai. There were some women who were giggling, when they saw me putting on makeup in the mirror, because they knew I was trans, but they were nice to me. They were polite. But I was a little wondering, what are they going to do? Are they going to call the security? So I always have this, worried feeling in my mind as to what you're thinking. But sometimes it's like that. Sometimes it's more comfortable to have a gender neutral bathroom in your office space, so that the trans community, if they are not comfortable using men, because trans women will have a problem, and trans men, sometimes they have problem too, because they are not comfortable going to the men's restroom. Sometimes they want a gender neutral bathroom. So that's one important thing. So I wanted to also touch upon this one about corporate. And this is a change that I've seen in US and in India. In India, in US, what I would say is a CEO's agenda has employee empowerment, and a D&I policies are a part of their the way in which they want to mandate it. So we need to do that for the CFOs and CEOs and COOs, C-level folks in India as well. A lot of these initiatives are taken by the HR, and then they show these numbers to the senior management, and they're like, okay, go for it. I don't get me involved. I like what you do. Keep doing that. That's not how your company should be run, because these need to come from the CEO. And I was in a call with the CEO of KPMG, and I've seen a lot of wonderful things he's doing. And that's how companies need to be. And I want to see more CEOs of the companies join the D&I calls along with the HR representatives and say that I want to empower the trans community. I want to empower the more D&I spectrum. I want to have more differently enabled people in my company. And why? Because this is important to me as a company. And it's so much, this is part of my mission statement, this is part of my agenda. So don't put it in your letterhead, but also show it. It should come from the heart. So that's a very important thing that you need to do. Someone asked the question about being an ally, right? So being an ally is, I'm going to talk a little bit about and close with this, but it's someone who can listen, listen and start saying that, hey, I'm getting it, I'm an ally. I'm going to be focusing on learning more about what's going on. And I'm talking about LGBTQ ally. I want to be a friend to my LGBTQ friend. I want to be a support to them. So the important thing that I would say, the ninth point is to be an ally is to, this is an acronym that I came up with, accept your friend who's trans or LGBTQ. Listen to them. Learn as to why they're different. What is it that they want to do to thrive in the company? And also have the yearning to help them. Yearning is different from just supporting the person. Yearning it comes from your heart. It comes from your heart. And when you sincerely want to be an ally for your LGBTQ community and a trans friend, you will do well. So it's so important to be an ally, and I have a document that talks a lot more about it. The other important point as a HR that we can keep in mind is as much as you have an LGBTQ organization or a trans support group within your company, you need to have that. That will really help. And also have an ally group, or you can call it, you can combine both and say, I want to have an LGBTQ and ally group. So that will really help in having both of them in the same room so that they will understand the issues much more. So sometimes the LGBTQ folks may not be comfortable going to the meeting alone, but if they have a friend who says, hey, there's a meeting, I want to come and see what you guys are talking about, it's okay, because they want to learn, right? They come and sit with you, and when you're talking about your issues at home, now the heart is opening and they're like, oh my God, I didn't know they're going through so much. I really, really want to support you. And that's how you can open allyship groups in your company. So it's not just for trans, but make sure that it's with the allies too. Like I have PFLAG we have PFLAG in US. It's basically called Parents and Friends of Lesbian and Gay. That's why it's called PFLAG. Now, why they started the group is because when the child came out, the parents felt like, wow, I want to be supportive to my child, and I'm going to be an ally for my child. And that's how they started this movement called PFLAG in US. It's a 40-year-old organization, and they do a lot of work in US. So with this, I'm just going to conclude. And I know I was talking a lot, but I just wanted to pause and take some questions. And I had this one question in my mind, which I wanted to ask Regina, which is, when is the first time you saw an LGBTQ person in your life? Not just trans, but an LGBTQ person in your life. If anyone wants to share, they can share. If you want to chat, you can chat. Regina, I'll leave it to you to coordinate that with this question.
So it's an interesting question. Feel free to type in your answer in the chat box. So what we'll do is we'll take up a couple of questions which have already come our way. And towards the end of the session, we can ask this again, and I'll read out some of the replies, and I'll give you my answer as well, because I have a very interesting story to share in this aspect. So is it okay if we can take a couple of questions now?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So one of the attendees wants to know how to examine employee sentiment on D&I policies and programs.
I think when you have mentorship groups, you have to have monthly mentorship groups and an open forum within the teams. Form smaller. If the person is working within a department or a group, you want to have team meetings. Just like you have team meetings, you need to also include one of those times when you can, it can be like an open house, where people talk about certain issues. They say that I don't like, I kind of feel a little bit threatened sometimes working in an environment like this, or, they can openly talk about it. If they are not able to do it, you also want to make sure that as a team, as a manager, if you have a trans person working in your organization, you want to have some peer feedback. You want to have a mentorship program and also a peer feedback that you can have them assigned to and say that, okay, you three are a part of a group and I can help you. More like a peer relationship. That is something you can do. Peer groups are good. Mentorships are good. So you will be able to get the sentiments in terms of what they are actually, what kind of issues they're going through. Because they may not be open to come and talk in a company open forum that, hey, I've been discriminated, I've been sexually harassed in the office. They may not share because trans people are so vulnerable, they will not be able to share. So give them an opportunity, give them smaller environments. Don't put them in a bigger place and say, you didn't share in that meeting, now you're coming and telling me this one in my room now. This is not how it is. But be patient with them because they are usually not very open about their lives. So it's already a lot of shame sometimes they go through. So be very patient in terms of when they are expressing, put them in smaller groups and let them be open. And also, the trans issues are also sometimes very normal issues, right? It could be that they just feel that, it's a long travel to the office. It could be a shorter travel, so lots of things. The bus came late. And then when they got into the bus, they said, this is only for ladies. So what are you doing in the bus? There could be a lot of discrimination, right? So we have to be very careful in terms of how we take those sentiments. And also make sure that we help the trans employees even in doing well at work. Performance is also important. So as much as you encourage them professionally, also I'll encourage them personally. So both has to be together. And if you suddenly find that sometimes you want to give them some feedback based on their outfit also, because I have had, one of the girl who was reporting to me in LA, she one day came in churidar to the office, and I told her that, hey, I wanted to tell her, and I was feeling so, how do I tell her? So I called one of my female, one of my colleagues, and I told her, hey, can you please tell her that, this is how it should be done? And she told me, why don't you tell her? And I felt like, okay, I'm going to tell her, but can you be with me? Because I don't want her to misunderstand me. So I explained to her, and then I even told her that you can go to Macy's, you get good clothes, formal clothes. And sometimes, you have to really know why they are different and understand it. And it can be resolved, but capturing their experience and their sentiment is absolutely important. Because you can't have a formalized one. And also you can do some feedback, how was your experience in the first 1 month after you joined the company? How do you feel? What was your reaction? You could also have them share when you have like 2-3 people. One other thing that I would also advise is have a counselor in your office. It's very important to have a person who's like a psychiatrist in your office, so that when they're going through certain issues, they can come and talk to them freely.
All right, thank you for sharing that. We have a couple of interesting replies which have come our way. One of the attendees wants to say that the first time they met a LGBTQ plus person was when they were 14. Another person wrote, the first exposure was through the Hijra community in India, but for me, it was when I moved to New York, sadly. The third person wrote in and said that for me, a sustainability and inclusion integrational professional, there was huge learning here since I've been working more on women and disabilities so far. So I think we've all had exposure, we've just not been aware about it and not been very inclusive at certain points. But that's an interesting question you asked, Celia, for sure.
Yeah.
So we have another question which is pouring in. Okay, so how to identify and analyze D&I communications, policies, and programs? I think you covered a bit of your answer in your previous answer, but if you can just throw light on this question, that would be great.
Sure. I think it also depends on what kind of industry your company is. Based on that, you want to take a look at, first thing is training manuals, right? We've already talked about it. So when you have employee orientation, there is a training program that they put a video and they want you to pass the test. So there are some, in California, they have something called sexual harassment policies. The sexual harassment policies in California mostly talks about women. It's not about trans women. So what we are doing is, I work for an organization called Trans Can Work. And this is my part-time job, by the way. So in my part-time job, what I do is I help this organization to help these organizations to change the policies. And statewide in California, we are trying to implement a policy where we are trying to include more in the trans sexual harassment also into the policies. And then security policies can change. HR and legal finance, it's very important, because sometimes the trans people, when they're coming out, they have not changed legally. They may have a male name. So I'll give you an example. My male name is Daniels. And when I came out, I said that I want to be known as Celia, but in the records, it will only reflect as Daniels, because that is how my social security is, my other documents are. So the HR and the legal department or the finance department that does your payroll, they will not publish your mail name to anyone. They will keep it private and confidential. So that the person's email can still be Celia at whatevercompany.com, but they can still store their mail name because of the financial and the legal documents that are available. Sometimes they do that. So they don't want to completely say that, oh, because your name is Daniels, I'm going to give your name as Daniels in your email, and that itself is offensive. The other way is also using pronouns in your email. Have pronouns in your email, so that I'll tell you another one good example as to how to introduce yourself to a trans person. You're meeting them in the street, they are trans, and you want to have a conversation with them, right? You're kind of wondering How do I do it? Can I go and say, hey, my name is Arun, I want to talk to you? No, it might throw them off, right? So you want to say, hey, my name is Arun, I go by he, him pronouns. How about yours? Once you say that my name is Arun and he, him pronouns, or my name is Smita, and I'll use, my name is Nishita Jain and I go by she, her pronouns. And how about yours? And now what they're doing is, wow, okay. Now it immediately hits them that they know about the LGBTQ community. They've gone through trainings. And then when you put it in your email saying that my name is Nishita Jain, she, her pronouns. Now that is a friendly way to tell people. And sometimes the trans folks, when they see their names with the pronouns, they immediately want to come and talk to you than someone else because they know that you understand them better. There are subtle ways, simple ways to change these policies. But it also depends on the state. I would love to go in detail on the policies, but it depends on certain states in India too. Like in California, the policies are different. In Minnesota, the policies are different. In Louisiana, the policies are very different. Workplace policies are different. So it all depends on the state also. So that's how it is more based on the industry, the company, and how you can change these policies. But you can change it.
All right. So we have another question in which the attendee is asking, what are some of your D&I policy or programs or initiatives that you have found are working? And they've also helped improve employee engagement.
So one of the things I was talking about was allyship, right? Allyship is really, really important. When you're having a meeting with the LGBTQ community, include allies also, friends and friends of LGBTQ, call it that way. So that will also help with that. And sorry, the question again, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure that I'm answering.
Sure, that's okay. I'll read it out again. So what are some of your D&I policies, and programs or initiatives that you have found are working and have also improved employee engagement?
The restrooms are very important. Those are things that we have made sure that it's working, because those are civil rights issue, right? You want to make sure that is happening. And also making sure that when they are entering the office, the badges are appropriate, and it should be based on what they want to, how they want to be identified. Like in the HR payroll, these are all possible. And also you have to explain to them about the medical benefits that are there for them when they're joining the company. But more on employee engagement, I would say, is have open dialogues with them. Tell them that, have you felt, how is the experience so far? It's been 6 months you've been working in your job. But if they're slacking in the job, talk to them about it, because we don't want to cut a slack on that, right? Though I'm trans, I have to really do well. I have to, in fact, work 10 times harder than an cisgender woman or a cisgender man, right? And that's how it is. Because if I want to really prove myself as an executive, I have to work like 10 times harder. And it is a lot of work in both sides to make sure you do that. And treat them like your employees. Don't treat them special. I know it sounds weird, but don't treat them special. Treat them like your employees. When you're professionally dealing with them, when you're personally dealing with them, have a compassion for that part of them. Like someone who's pregnant, right? Suppose one of your teammates is pregnant, you want to be compassionate with them, you don't want to be yelling at them. So there are some office etiquettes that we need to follow, and make sure that employee empowerment is a general policy that you use for anyone. But when it comes to empathy, when it comes to certain aspects of your team, that is how your team manager or the team leader generates, or they establish that. They're very considerate to them. Sometimes they would have taken some hormones, and they would have gone through surgery. You don't want to go and say, so is it paining there? Don't ask such questions, right? When they have done surgery and all that, because sometimes be very careful in how you ask those questions. You're not going to go and ask, your colleague who just had a baby that, is it paining down there? No, you never ask that question. That is such a weird question, right?
Yeah.
So you never want to be asking some questions. So you need to also know that if you want to empower your employees, cultivate that team sense of smaller peer relationships. Mentorship programs help. Happy hours help a lot, because they love going out. They love just acceptance and listening. Important thing. employee empowerment. It will really, really help.
Right. So the last question for the evening, and it's a very interesting one and a little long-winded one, if I may warn you. So Canadians have Multiculturalism Act passed in 1988 that
Mm.
aims to preserve and enhance cultural diversity. Uh, does USA and India also have any such act?
No, unfortunately, in US, it's going the other way. I have to say, I don't know much about India, but what happens is it's called intersectionalities. You know, with Black Lives Matters, I've joined the Black Lives Matters movement because I came out as a trans activist. But when I came out, I saw the gun violence happening. I saw the healthcare disparity. I saw the immigration issues, which the Latino community is going through. And I saw Black Lives Matters movement, some of the issues they have. So what happens is, I'm calling them as intersectionalities. See, I'm an immigrant in this country, right? I'm a citizen, but I'm still an immigrant. I'm a brown person of color. And so the issues that I'm dealing with are issues that my wife is also dealing with because she's a brown person of color. And I'm a father, right? I'm a parent. So there are so many intersectionalities that cannot be taken away. And suppose if you have an office where in Canada, it's much more open because of the government there, the prime minister, is very, very different. But it also depends on the leaders of the country. Now with the current government in US, it's gotten a little more conservative. So they started putting a lot of conservative policies, and that's taking away some of the intersectionalities that are really, really important. Because today, when I am standing and talking to you, I don't want you to think that Celia is a trans person. No, I want you to know that I am like you. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a father. I'm married to a beautiful woman. I'm a musician. I love hiking a lot. I love fashion. I love photography. I love movie making. And these are so many qualities that I have. And I'm a human rights activist. So those elements are really important. And there is no multiple cultural diversity day, but what they have is there is a separate day in US for Black, for Black community, African American community. It's called African American Heritage Month. And then they have the Pride Month, which is June, is a whole Pride Month. And then they have a Latino community, heritage, more than Cinco de Mayo, and few other events that happen. So there are a few areas that they focus on, and only those minorities that are a large population, they focus here in US. I don't know about much in India, but yeah, this is something that happens. But I think in my opinion, it's even if you take the transgender community, right? If you see the person who is socioeconomically very well-to-do, they are respected in the community because of the money that they have. When I came to India, people are respecting me because they think that I'm rich and I'm great and all that. But I am exactly like anyone else. So those, and like a Dalit trans are somewhere here, right? They are being treated, they are kind of burnt alive in Hyderabad. One of my friends is working with Dalit trans community. And my heart goes out because sometimes there's so much of disparity even within the transgender community. So when you look at it, it's so important for us to focus on these identities too. A person who's a Muslim in your office is as important as a person who's transgender. That is the type of importance you need to give. A person who's a veteran, a person who's differently enabled, they are all important when it comes to the diversity and inclusion. It should not be just men and men and men. It should be the whole spectrum of people. And that's when your company can be successful. It's not like elevating one of them or putting down one of the groups. You see, that's why I showed you the triangle, right? Transgender people are in the low because they don't want to come out. I don't know how it would have been if I had come out in India. I may have had a different experience, but it's not that different coming out in US too. US is very open, but you have lots of issues right now. People get killed. 27 trans women were killed last year of color. So if I go out and someone hates me, they can kill me. And that is how US has become so hateful with trans women of color. If you even Google and see trans women of color, Transgender Day of Remembrance is in November. It's coming today. I'm sorry, it's coming in November. So try to understand that there are so many issues that are there in US with transgender community too.
All
I
right.
know it's a big answer, but I just kind of, wanted you to know that, I stay in touch with me if you want to, because I can go in length about this. I've written some articles which are really going to be helpful. I also have links where it will lead you to some of these allyship ideas. And I will send that article to Regina and she can post it for you. So
Absolutely. So, Celia, thank you for sharing your journey, and thank you for sharing policies which I think are quite helpful and we can incorporate them in the Indian context as well. By the way, there was a attendee who asked us initially if there is any literature available on LGBTQ plus issues. So Inclusify is a platform which covers a lot of topics all around diversity and inclusion. So be sure to check our website out, and you'll see wonderful articles, live stories which are covered, and you'll also see live webinars which are happening on a weekly basis. In fact, we would be very happy to connect with you and get into a conversation. So do write in to us with your feedback about this webinar and give us new topics. And you can reach out to us on hello@inclusify.io. Celia, I would again like to thank you for sharing your entire journey and giving us your time. We hope to have another session with you where we can again deep dive and talk about more important issues.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Regina, because I wasn't able to get into the really, really meat of a document. You can take a policy document and go over it one by one. I have done that with the company. So, but that is more of a deep dive, finding what the gaps are and how you can rectify those gaps. We can do those sessions, and I have some experts and lawyers who are my friends who can also help your company in that process. They'll be happy to help in any way possible. So, thank you for this wonderful time, and I hope it was beneficial. And hope we can change the corporate industry in India.
Absolutely, one story at a time.
Mhm.
So, with that, Celia, I hope you have a beautiful day ahead, and I hope all the attendees have a beautiful evening or a beautiful day, depending on whichever part of the world you're tuning in from. The next session next week on 30th September is going to be a panel discussion, so be sure to tune in there as well. With that, thank you and have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye. Mhm.